I'm Doug Boynton, and this is WHRO's Weekly Edition, highlighting the week's news and stories happening in our region. We begin June with these stories. An innovative new project from the Hampton Roads Sanitation District will create natural gas out of sewage treatment byproduct. Norfolk is now a year-round home port for Carnival Cruise Line. WHRO spoke with Norfolk's Carnival czar to learn how it will impact the region's economy. And the Trump administration wants more Navy ships. It would reverse a dip in manufacturing, but that means finding many more workers to build them. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. Starting things off this week, a new project will turn a byproduct of treating sewage into pipeline-ready natural gas. WHRO's Catherine Hafner reports from the Hampton Roads Sanitation District operation in Virginia Beach.
Here at the Atlantic Treatment Plant, HRSD handles up to 54 million gallons of wastewater per day. The process leaves behind a gas largely made of methane, a big source of climate pollution. This byproduct is currently burned off into the atmosphere. BJ Ward with HRSD says they wanted a more sustainable method.
One great way to do that is by cleaning up the gas and turning it into a renewable fuel.
Virginia Natural Gas now plans to do just that. They'll process the gas from sewage treatment into what's called renewable natural gas and inject it straight into local pipelines. Here's Carl Garofalo with the company.
We're going to be producing enough gas to provide the year-round needs for over 4,000 homes.
Virginia Natural Gas is waiting for state approval before building $30 million of new infrastructure at the Virginia Beach plant. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Two local Hampton Roads HIV/AIDS service organizations say cuts to prevention and treatment grants are having an immediate impact on their work. WHRO's Nick McNamara details the effect it's having on those who are uninsured.
The LGBT Life Center lost $600,000 since 2024. Minority AIDS support services, with offices in Norfolk and Newport News, lost more than $550,000. Life Center CEO Stacy Walls says the cuts defund proven and life-saving programs built over 25 years with no plans to replace them. Representatives of the Life Center and other nonprofits say the cuts will come at the cost of medical care for uninsured people with HIV and reduced case management staff that help newly diagnosed people get and keep insurance to stay in long-term treatment. The highest rates of new HIV diagnoses are found in southern states. Hampton Roads has some of the highest rates in Virginia. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Nearly 30 years after Norfolk hosted its first cruise ship, the city now hosts Carnival Cruises year-round. WHRO's Ryan Murphy sat down with Norfolk Cruise czar Stephen Kirkland to talk about what it means for the region's economy.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks for talking with us. Norfolk's obviously got a long maritime history. How did the city get started bringing in cruises?
So Nauticus was built in 1994, and there was a little pier behind it, essentially to attract Navy ships, to bring Navy ships downtown to introduce, obviously, the Navy to the community. And in 96, Nauticus hosted its first cruise ship, and the ship was hanging off both sides of the pier. But it began the interest, Norfolk's interest in cruises. And I think there was maybe 12 over the next 4 years or something. I'll never forget it. I signed the paperwork on September the 10th, 2001. And of course, 9/11, the next day, the world changed. Of course, the travel industry as a whole was devastated. But the cruise industry said it's not that people are afraid to take a cruise. They don't want to get on a plane to fly to Miami to take a cruise. And so that's when you began seeing Philadelphia and Galveston and New Orleans and Norfolk and Baltimore really start growing.
So after decades of ups and downs, we're now hosting Carnival year-round for the first time. How do thousands of passengers coming through every weekend play into the local economy?
If you and I were to drive out to Cedar Grove parking lot right now, you would see license plates from Pennsylvania, from North Carolina, a ton from North Carolina, from West Virginia. And so these are guests that are traveling from outside of Hampton Roads to come here to take a cruise. Now, to be fair, many of them will come here, especially if they're within 2 or 3 hours drive, and they will park their car, they will get on our shuttle bus, they will come here, they'll jump on a cruise. But many of them are staying the night before or the night after. It's why every port city in the country wants this activity. Sort of the industry multiplier is $125 per passenger. That's spending out in the community, whether it be on hotels or eating on Granby Street or whatever the deal is. 2 weeks ago, I met a woman who runs a donut shop on 21st Street. And she said, oh my gosh, when a cruise ship comes in. And I said, well, you're on 21st Street. That's a little bit further afield. Not that it's far, but it's not far from the parking. And I hadn't put 2 and 2 together. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. So we hear it all the time anecdotally. We've got to capture some of that data, but we know it to be true.
Now that you guys are getting into the groove with the year-round Carnival service, what comes next?
We have one pier. And so we are never going to be Miami, nor do we want to be. It's just not our ambition. Where I think our next opportunity for growth is, and where you'll soon begin seeing a lot more attention paid, is growing the port of call business. We have Carnival every single weekend, having these ships in on a Tuesday when, let's be honest, there might not be a lot of other things going on around town, and having 3,000 people get off. That's where there really is magic, and that's, for me, the next prize is growing that. It's not like we're sitting next to Barbados or something. And so you've got to find ships that are doing the right itineraries that want to include Norfolk as part of that. We've seen a lot of success over the years with German cruise lines because they really do promote and position Norfolk and this region as sort of the cradle, the birthplace of America. This is such a great win for Williamsburg, such a great win for Jamestown and Yorktown, and should be, by the way, Virginia Beach. We don't want these passengers just within the 4 corners of this city. We really want them to make an impact on this region, and that's our opportunity.
That was Stephen Kirkland, who oversees Norfolk's cruise operations as the executive director of Nauticus. Still ahead on Weekly Edition, it's that time of year again. Turtling nesting season has started in the Outer Banks. But first, Governor Glenn Youngkin visited a school in Hopewell last week to officially sign legislation banning cell phones in Virginia's public schools. WVTF's Brad Kuttner brings us the latest in the governor's war on mobile phones.
Governor Glenn Youngkin started pushing cell phone-free schools years ago, but only after an effort was approved by Democrats in the legislature earlier this year did it become a reality.
We know that a cell phone-free classroom is good for instruction, it's good for classroom dynamics, and it's good for the overall school day and school environment.
That's Henrico Senator Schuyler Van Valkenburg, one of the authors of the bill signed by Youngkin Friday. He's also a high school civics teacher, so he's seen firsthand the damage cell phones have caused. Fairfax Senator Stella Pekarsky was another author of the effort. She said some localities in her district had already implemented the bell-to-bell ban, and it was producing results.
They have been able to really focus on their lessons, on the conversations in the classroom, on relationships with other students.
The governor, meanwhile, said the new state law was a chance for students to free themselves from the grasp of cell phones, including the students at Carter G. Woodson Middle School who sat in attendance for his signing.
We are indeed embracing freedom today. We are indeed embracing your futures, and they are spectacular.
The school cell phone ban technically goes into effect July 1st. Students can expect to see the impacts in the fall of 2025. In Richmond, I'm Brad Kuttner.
Now you see it, now you don't. The Department of Homeland Security removed a news release naming 5 Hampton Roads localities as sanctuary cities. WHRO's Barry Graham breaks down what that means exactly.
More than 500 localities nationwide were named in the news release. The 5 in Hampton Roads were Virginia Beach, Hampton, Portsmouth, Newport News, and Gloucester County. The pushback was nationwide, not dissimilar to the letter sent by Hampton Mayor Jimmy Gray that noted that immigration officials met with Police Chief Jimmy Weidman earlier this year. Gray went on to say, quoting, "If there was any questions or concerns about our cooperation with federal immigration officials, We would have hoped and expected DHS to contact us directly. By Sunday, the news release was missing from the DHS website, indicating that it had been moved or deleted. Barry Graham, WHRO News.
If you're a sea turtle, it's the most exciting time of the year. WHRO's Ryan Murphy reports that nesting season has officially started in the northern Outer Banks.
The Network for Endangered Sea Turtles, or NEST, says volunteers spotted the first sea turtle nest of the season. A clutch of loggerhead turtle eggs was found on the beach in Corolla. Coastal North Carolina is a nesting ground for loggerhead turtles, which are considered threatened, as well as endangered green and Kemp's Ridley turtles. NEST volunteers comb the beaches of the Outer Banks looking for signs of egg laying. The group says it's installed temperature sensors to monitor the newly found nest and put up stakes to protect it from being trampled. The eggs usually take between 7 and 11 weeks to hatch. NEST reminds beachgoers to stay away from sea turtles and their nests and to never shine lights on them at night. The egg-laying and hatching season runs until October. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
President Donald Trump wants the Navy to have more ships. He's proposed a new White House Office of Shipbuilding to revitalize an American industry that has been shrinking for decades. Experts say reversing that trend will mean finding hundreds of thousands of workers and persuading more young people to pursue careers in manufacturing. Steve Walsh reported for the American Homefront Project.
Xavier Lattimore came to Norfolk from California roughly 2 years ago. He enrolled at Old Dominion University to earn a degree in marine biology. Then the bills started piling up.
I moved out here to take care of my grandma. I thought it might work out, going to college and trying to still figure it out, but bills are a thing. And finances are always going to have to be put over, education at some point.
He left Old Dominion and took a welding class at a community college, which is how Lattimore ended up at a job fair looking for an entry-level position in the shipbuilding industry.
Welding isn't something that I'm forcing myself to get into. It's not something that's like the last resort, but I realized that when I got into welding, I did enjoy it. Still in the future, I still have a dream of becoming a marine biologist. It's not out the picture, but you can go to college at the age of 30.
This job fair is at the Nauticus, a maritime museum. The event was designed to draw job seekers like Lattimore, but also to promote the industry to families. At one booth, a children's author read from her book, Willow Discovers Welding. Shipbuilders are getting creative as their number one client, the U.S. Navy, pressures companies to increase production of new ships while handling a growing maintenance backlog. Josh Sheffield is with the Hampton Roads Workforce Council.
It's an ongoing process that we're going to have to do for many, many years to come to fill all the jobs that we need here in the region. It's really great that we're starting even younger and younger.
Hampton Roads is home to the Navy's Norfolk Naval Shipyard, a major Navy maintenance hub. Navy Secretary John Phelan made nearby Newport News Shipbuilding one of his first stops after taking office. It's the only shipyard set up to build the new Ford-class aircraft carriers and the only one of 2 places to build nuclear submarines. New ships have been consistently behind schedule. The Trump administration has been pushing a grand plan to revive commercial shipbuilding while increasing the size of the Navy. A bipartisan group of lawmakers have also introduced a bill designed to spur more shipbuilding. Phelan gave himself until July, 100 days, to have a draft plan.
We spent the last 10 years teaching people how to code. We're going to spend the next 10 teaching them how to use their hands. That is going to be a critical skill set. I believe that we can create very good careers.
But rebuilding the workforce will likely take longer than a decade, says Jonathan Page, an engineering professor with the University of Michigan. He says pay hasn't kept pace with other trades.
An electrician could earn 2 or 3 times the rate, putting outlets in somebody's house versus installing cables on a ship.
Page worked in nearly every aspect of ship maintenance and design over a 21-year career in the Navy. He saw the aftermath of the industry being hollowed out in the 1990s. After the Cold War, industry and the Navy both lost talent. The number of universities offering degrees in naval architecture and maritime engineering shrank.
Universities are like, well, this isn't serving our graduates well to give them a degree where the market might be collapsing. And so many of the programs collapsed.
The University of Michigan, along with a handful of other universities, has been gearing back up. Page says even before talk of expansion, the industry needed another 100,000 workers in the next decade, from trades to engineers, just to keep pace.
That was WHRO's Steve Walsh reporting for the American Homefront Project, a public media collaboration that reports on American military life and veterans.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
The U.S. Senate is now considering a federal budget bill in support of President Donald Trump's domestic agenda. The legislation makes historic cuts to the Medicaid program. VPM's Adrian Hoare-McGibbon spoke with 1st District Congressman Rob Whitman about his vote, which supports the changes to Medicaid.
Yeah, I voted yes to pass the bill. I thought it had a good necessary reforms to make sure that Medicaid is sustainable, to make sure, too, that we're doing the things necessary to protect our vulnerable populations and make sure that they have access to those benefits. The same, too, with making sure that we provide sustainability for this nation's energy. I'm on the Armed Services Committee, so making sure we're modernizing our military in face of the threats that we have, making sure, too, that our working families continue to enjoy, the lower tax rates, because if not, the average family in the 1st Congressional District would see a $2,300 increase in their federal tax bill if we didn't pass it. So we had a lot of good provisions in the bill.
You talk about protecting vulnerable people on Medicaid. How, in your mind, does this bill do that?
For me, this is personal. I am adopted. At 8 months of age, the Children's Home Society of Virginia provided an opportunity for my birth mother to make sure that I had a great home, and I did. So for me, I know how important it is to make sure that expectant mothers have access to health care, that children have access, individuals with disabilities, seniors. And we know that as Medicaid continues in the years to come, it faces some challenges. So what this does is to make sure the resources are going to be there for those folks that rely on Medicaid.
What would you say to people who hear those estimates and may be concerned about losing coverage?
Well, I can assure folks that if you're in those vulnerable populations, your coverage is going to continue. There will be no interruptions there. The changes that are made is to make sure that there are work requirements for those folks that are able to work. And if you're not able to work, or if you have children at home or parents at home, or if you have a physical disability, you're not going to be required to go to work. But if you are able-bodied, you're going to be required to either go to work or to train to go to work or to volunteer. So we provide lots of opportunities there. And if you meet any of those criteria, you'll still continue to receive Medicaid. For those folks that are here undocumented, this system is designed for U.S. citizens. So if you're here and undocumented, you will not receive Medicaid. Also, if you're deceased, just makes sense. We don't want deceased individuals on the Medicaid rolls. Those are resources that need to go for people in need. If you're dual enrolled, if you're in 2 states and unfortunately receiving benefits in both states, we're going to make sure that we take out that duality of those individuals that are receiving benefits. So it is really getting after waste, fraud, and abuse. It's also making sure, too, that the system is functioning for those people that it's designed for. Remember, this is designed for our vulnerable populations. And as we have more people that come onto the Medicaid rolls, we have to make sure that the resources are there as these individuals come onto the rolls.
What do you say to folks who argue that this is just adding barriers to folks who are in need of care?
Well, listen, this is an incredibly simple process. So it's not creating barriers. It's just making sure that we have very, very high accuracy in the rolls of people receiving Medicaid. We want to do that. We want to make sure that those dollars are there, and having that high level of accuracy there assures that those resources will be there, not only now, but in the future.
Thank you so much, Congressman. I really appreciate your time today.
VPM's Adrian Hoare-McGibbon also spoke with 4th District Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan about possible cuts to Medicaid.
Preliminary estimates show that not only were there cuts in Medicaid, but that the bill could trigger significant cuts in Medicare. because of the pay-as-you-go law. And so I think between the gutting of the Affordable Care Act, the gutting of Medicaid, we will see hundreds of thousands of Virginians who will lose their health insurance, but they'll still get sick, and they will go to the emergency room when it's more expensive to treat, oftentimes when it's too late to treat, and those costs will be passed to the rest of us. That's exactly why we expanded Medicaid in Virginia back in 2018 when I was in the legislatures, because we were worried about the impact of that uncompensated care. We were worried about our rural providers closing. And now all those worries are back on the table. But on top of that, you have millions of Americans, a third of them children, who are losing food assistance, who are also going to be losing access to free and reduced lunch in schools. And so you'll have hungrier Virginians, you will have sicker Virginians, all so that the top wealthy can get a little bit richer.
So how could people on Medicaid expansion be impacted?
So the two biggest ways is now if you're part of the expansion population and you make up to $300 a week, you will have to pay up to a $35 copay every time you go see a doctor. And what that means is somebody who also has to pay rent, pay utilities, put food on the table, who now probably won't have access to SNAP benefits, they're not going to go to the doctor and pay that copay. They're going to use that to put food on the table. And as a result, they're not going to get care. And when they show up in the emergency room, we will pay the rest. The other piece is now you will have to prove that you are working and go through these red tape requirements that Virginia does not have a process set up for to do automatically. And then when you're kicked off of Medicaid, you won't be able to get access to the subsidies to buy through the exchange. And so you're going to go uninsured. The state's going to have to decide, does it put in the money to pay the difference? When it's also seeing other cuts, now for the first time, the state has to contribute to SNAP benefits and has to fill in gaps from other federal funding, as we're seeing the federal workforce, with Virginia being the second highest number of federal employees, now no longer working and contributing to the tax base.
Republicans have said that these cuts will help protect Medicaid for future generations. What's your response to that?
They did nothing to address the real cost of Medicaid, which is the fact that people are living longer and need more long-term care, the cost of prescription drugs going up. They didn't do anything to address that. They didn't invest any of this back into the healthcare system to strengthen Medicaid. All of the money went to tax cuts, the bulk of which benefit the top wealthiest Americans.
That was VPM's Adrienne Hoare McGibbon with Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan. You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Catherine Hafner, Nick McNamara, Steve Walsh, Ryan Murphy, Barry Graham, and Sienna Morales, WVTF's Brad Kuttner, and VPM's Adrienne Hoare McGibbon. And thanks as always to Connor Worley, who produced today's show. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed. You can get news updates at WHRO.org, the WHRO smartphone app, and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.